Hi, I'm Sophia Halliday. I've been through the foster care system due to child abuse and with my parents. I've survived domestic violence. I've been through homelessness as a single mom with two kids. My mom heavily used in my childhood, and when I was a year old, she gave birth to my brother who was born with his system. So when I was brought to the hospital room to meet my brother, we were met by CPS and taken away and separated. Going in and out of foster care is like a roller coaster because you were abused by your parents and then you were abused by the system, and you're just going back and forth. I was really, really close with my youngest brother. He's 4 years younger than me. So by 5 years old, I took care of him when he was born because my mom wasn't around a lot. So when I was separated from him, it was really hard. There are some recollections from the first foster care, the house that I remember. I must have been like 2 or 3. Me and my youngest brother were placed together, thank God, but we were placed with a Hispanic family who had a lot of other children there. I don't know if they were all foster kids or not, but they locked me and my brother in the basement and fed us 3 peanut butter and jellies a day, and we were there for at least 2 weeks. That was one of the worst conditions I can remember living in as a child. And then the other memories I have are being abused in other homes. There was one time, it was in Santa Ana. One of my abusers locked me in a room after I did something wrong. Luckily, my little brother was there with me, so I broke out of the home with my brother and I put him on my back with no shoes on, and I was just running around the city trying to find my way to somewhere, I don't even know where. But these teenagers saw, a little girl with no shoes carrying a little boy on her back and called the police because we had no adults around. And we ended up being taken to the hospital where we told the police what was going on in that home. So then we were taken to Orangewood. That home was ultimately shut down because of the amount of findings that happened there. Age 10 and younger, I don't have very many positive memories. I went through like every abuse that you can imagine a child going through, me and my brothers went through. One of my abusers would bring me into their room, lay me on the bed, hold me down, and assault me. And yeah, that went on for about a year, and someone knew about it but continued to let it happen. First time I went that I remember, I was 5, and then the second time I went, I was 7. I don't remember too much about the first time I went there when I was 5, and all 3 of my brothers were there, but there was a little girls section, little boys section, so we were ultimately separated. We only had visitation hours that we got to see each other. Orangewood is where the kids that they can't find a place for go. They take them to Orangewood because they're open 24/7. So they take the kid there until they can find a group home or a foster home to take that kid to. It wasn't the worst, but it wasn't the greatest either. But Orangewood, you weren't allowed to leave the walls. Like, you were literally caged. You were not allowed to leave the walls. When your parents got to visit you, which only my dad visited us, it was in this little brick room in a basement, so that was fun. And then we would get visitation rights taken from us. We acted up, and we all acted up quite a bit because of what we had been through. So yeah, it was rough. I did not respond well to not being able to see my brothers. I acted out in a lot of ways. There was like a metal pole once around the playground, and this little girl was messing with my little brother. So I grabbed the metal pole and I hit her in the head with it, and she fell unconscious, and I never saw her again after that. I was extremely protective of them, so if anybody hurt them or made them cry, I reacted not in a good way, because I only knew violence because that's what I was taught. When I was a child, I did witness a lot of violence. To an extent, I felt like it was normal because I didn't know anything else. So in a sense, I also knew it was wrong. Growing up, I experienced being hit with extension cables. I would be held up against a wall by my hair or my neck and screamed at for hours. There was one time My brother's face was smashed into a table for no reason. And we just felt helpless, like we couldn't do anything about what was happening to us. You can't do anything about it, and nobody really saves you. The last time we were taken away, I remember exactly, I was 7 years old, and the system was like, that's it. Either you guys get your life together for your kids, or we're giving them up for adoption. That was the last time they were going to take us. So my dad worked his off to get all of us back. He had to go through parenting classes. He had to go to weekly tests. He sometimes daily tests. He had to go through anger management. And he had to go through all of this while working full time. And at that time, I think he was in his 40s, because he had me when he was late, or when he was older. He got us back one at a time, and we stayed in an apartment from me being 10 years old all the way up until 20 years old, to the exact month, actually. So from 10 years old to 20 years old was the longest I've ever stayed in one place in my entire life. I was extremely happy the day my dad picked me up. I got picked up early from school, and they took me home, and my dad picked me up, and I'll never forget walking into my own room. It felt so good to be home. And as my brother started coming back and we started making friends, I made real friends for the first time in my entire life. I didn't really know what a friend was, because you move around so much, you never really get to make any friends. And some of those people I still talk to today. Some of the first kids I met, there was one girl in particular who's still my best friend today. I put her through a lot of stuff. She kept trying to be my friend. I didn't want to be friends, but she kept pushing, and we became best friends, and we're still friends 20 odd some years later. I had a really bad ADHD, so focusing was extremely difficult for me. Nobody really wanted to help me, so I did not get good grades at all. I still fought a lot. People would even look at me wrong sometimes, and I would pick a fight. That happened all the way up until high school. The friends that I did make knew I wasn't bad, and that's what mattered to me. I was 20 years old when I got into my first domestic violence situation, but I didn't know it in the beginning. This guy was my best friend for years. I had met him when I was 17, and he was my best friend. I really thought I knew him. So behind closed doors, after we got married and I had his son, so I was helping raise him as well. That relationship was more psychological and mental and financial abuse. It wasn't really physical, but it was everything else. So getting out of that relationship it messed with my head. I lost all my self-worth, and immediately after divorcing him, I got into another relationship. The first thing that I can remember when we were married and after my son was born, he had a problem, and I woke up in the middle of the night and he was gone, and I just had a feeling of where he was. It was at one of his friends' houses down the street, so I walked down there in the middle of the night, and I caught him using her very bad. He also tried to deny that the whole situation happened afterward. A lot of the abuse during the relationship was, I was like a married single mom, so I worked, I took care of the kids, I did everything, and he would take my money and he would sleep with other women. During the custody battle is when the abuse really started. He flattened my tires on my car that I had just gotten. When we first separated, I was still on his phone plan, and he told me that he was going to try and take my son from me if I didn't find my own place to live and get a job. When I moved out of his parents' house, he sold everything of mine. I had to start from scratch all over by myself, and I eventually got full custody because the judge told me to prove he had an anger problem, which I did prove over a course of 3 years. So I ended up with full custody after 3 years of trying to prove my point. He was doing all this stuff, and the judge did not care. He told me to prove it. So I had to document and catch him in his web of lies and document everything in order to get full custody of my son. And it was a roller coaster for sure, but I got my son, and my son's safe to this day. His dad's been in and out of his life, mostly out, not in. It hurts him because He loves his dad, but he knows he's not good for him. He's old enough to know that it's not his fault, but he's old enough to also understand that it's his dad that doesn't call, and that's not his fault. The boyfriend that I got after my divorce, at first, he was the bestest man I thought on planet Earth. He love bombed the hell out of me. I was only 22 or 23 when I met him, so I was fresh out of a divorce, and I thought oh wow, this person thinks I'm so great. This is going to be wonderful. This is going to be the best thing ever. And slowly he starts showing his real self. The first time he laid his hands on me, we were drinking and we had an argument about something. I went to grab my purse and he wouldn't let me grab my purse. He kept saying, "Get the fuck out of my house." And, he's following me down the street and I'm leaving without my purse. And he's yelling at me and I yelled something back at him and he charges at me and pushes me backwards as hard as he can. And my head hit the asphalt and I didn't know it at first, but my head had cracked open and I was what? But at that point, I was legit scared for my life. So I waved the first car down that I see. And luckily, it was one of his neighbors. They took me in the house. They called the cops. The ambulance came. I had a major concussion. My memory was completely shot for like 3 days. I couldn't remember anything. My dad and my brother helped me take care of my son because I couldn't remember. And this is when I still had half and half custody with my son's dad, so my son would go to his dad for 3 days and come with me for 3 days. That was the first time he laid his hands on me. The second time was when we lived in North Dakota. We were in the basement living room and he had pushed me. I had landed on the couch, but my back flew back and my neck bent over the back of the couch, and I actually got a fracture in my neck from that, and I couldn't move my neck for I don't know how long. I can't believe I took him back after that. Nonetheless, I actually got pregnant while we were still living in California, and he pushed me to get a abortion, and I really, really did not want to have that abortion. That still haunts me to this day. And a year later, I got pregnant again. We were planning on having a baby, stupidly. I was head over heels still in love with him after all the abuse. I left him when I was 4 months pregnant because he pushed me out of bed. And at that point, I knew if I stayed, I wasn't going to have that baby. And I really wanted that baby. At that point, it was between staying with him and possibly losing this child, another child, or leaving and making sure my kids are safe. So I left when I was 4 months pregnant. While he was at work, I packed up my car with as much of my stuff as I could, and I left. 4 months pregnant, drove across the country. I immediately started therapy. Was just awarded full custody of my son at the time, and I just graduated a homeless shelter. I moved in and we had planned to move to North Dakota to start a new life. The first morning, I should say, I threw up because I was pregnant and I didn't know it. I was on birth control. So at first I thought it was just the flu. And I went out with a friend and I told her, I threw up this morning. I think we need to go grab a pregnancy test. So we did. I was pregnant. I told him that night. He was not happy. He just kept saying, "We're about to move to North Dakota. We can't have a kid right now. You're being terrible for bringing another kid into this world right now. If you're really going to have that baby, you need to leave. I don't want you in my life anymore." And I would leave his house to be homeless all over again. I just couldn't do that to my son. I didn't want my son and this baby of me to be on the streets. And so in a way, I'm like, he's right. I can't do that to my kid again. We're finally headed towards stability. I can't. So I agreed to have an abortion, and that was the hardest decision. Besides, it's one of the hardest decisions of my life. I cried for a long time over that. I had a daughter when I was 19 years old, and I gave her to a family member to raise. I wish I had a supportive family that I could have went to. My parents were stupidly still together, and I can't live with my mom. I can't. I wish I had a good mom to go to. I have my dad, but I just couldn't live with my mom again and deal with her abuse and then subject my son to that abuse. I don't know if any of you know what it's like to be homeless in California, but it ain't fun, especially when you're trying to do your best and you're surrounded by these people who are not trying to do your best nor have your best interest in mind. I wish things could have been different. I do get flashbacks of the pain. I was only 5 weeks along, 4 or 5 weeks along. It was very, very early on, but it hurt really, really bad, passing the baby. There was a lot of cramping and I had to act like everything was normal. I had to just go on. He acted like nothing happened. He laid there with me as I cried and went through the process, but as soon as I was physically better, he expected me to act like nothing happened, and just to go on with my life and never talk about it. So I wasn't really able to fully grieve, I guess, now that I really think about it. The first time I was homeless was when I was 22. We were living with my parents, and my parents got sick of my now ex-husband and all his drama, so they moved out, and so the owners of the place wanted us out, so we had to leave, but I had already told him that I wanted a divorce, so he took our son to live with his mother, and I had to go to the streets. I stayed with some friends on and off, and that's actually how I met my second abuser, was while I was homeless. He was a tattoo artist, and yeah, that's how I met him. I was homeless when I was 22, and being around other people who are homeless definitely don't have your best interests in mind. It was really cold. I was always okay knowing that my son didn't have to go through that at that time. So, he had a warm bed at least, and his dad was neglecting him, but at least he had a home. When I left my abusive ex, I moved into my dad's house, and from there I bounced around from place to place, shelters, friends' houses, while working 2 jobs and going to school, and still couldn't afford a place to live. So I moved to my friend's house in Idaho because he had a spare room, and that friend eventually became my boyfriend, and we now have a daughter together. So he has a son, I have 2 sons, and then we have our baby girl. Yeah, they're talking about it. I was diagnosed with PTSD, so I can see some of the instances in my head as we talk about it, and all those emotions just come back. I'm pretty good at hiding my emotions, so you can't always see how I feel on my face. I've just always kept those kind of things to myself. I always worry about burdening other people with my problems. So I'm used to keeping things inside, which I know isn't healthy, but I'm working on it slowly but surely. Even talking about it makes me nervous because I feel like I make other people worry, and I don't like making people worry. PTSD is no freaking joke, man. You could be completely fine. The day could be completely fine. Your life could be going completely fine. And out of nowhere, a memory, suppressed or not, will just hit you, and all those emotions just come flooding back. So talking about it, sometimes I get kind of shaky in my voice because it's hard to talk about. It's really, really hard to get those words to come out of your mouth. But for a lot of reasons, it could be anything from fear to anger to sadness. It's just too hurtful to talk about, or you're just scared to talk about it. I've told myself a lot to not be scared to talk about it, because the more people talk about it, the more awareness of the problem will happen, So I feel like everyone should talk about their stories, and I'm hoping things change in this next generation or so, with men and abuse. Lately, I've been having nightmares. Another part of PTSD is the nightmares. And you wake up, and it's almost like you're in that moment that you had the nightmare about, and you get it's a memory from the past, but it's obviously a nightmare because it's scary. And you still got kids to take care of, so you kind of gotta sit for a minute, listen to your music, collect yourself enough to so that you can go be a parent like you're supposed to be, no matter what. So, being someone who has a lot of trauma and PTSD, but also trying to be a good parent, break that generational trauma, and not put any of your traumas onto your children. It's rough. It's really, really rough, and you mess up, but you get better as you go along because you learn. And that's all you can do is learn, because no kid is born with a handbook. And sometimes, like, my eldest son has a lot of emotional issues. He has ADHD and high functioning autism, so he's really, really smart, but he's still emotionally, like, really young, if that makes sense. So me and him collide a lot. He's also a preteen, so I think that's also why we collide a lot. I wasn't a very fun teenager either, so I can't really judge him too much. Well, now I'm 33 years old. I've got a great job at a daycare working with toddlers. I'll soon be back into therapy. My sons will also be in therapy, and we're all going to work on things together. Things are going great. I love it out in Idaho. The mountains are just gorgeous, and the hikes are great. The adventures are amazing. We've been in the same place for 3 years now, and we're doing so much better. I eventually want to help kids that were in foster care, and help teens, or be a mentor, or maybe even be a foster parent one day myself. We'll see once we get our own house and see where things go from there. But I do eventually want to help kids that are in the foster care system in some way, shape, or form. That's exactly why I want to do this. I feel like it's going to help me in my healing journey, and I'm hoping it helps other people out there too.